The Awakening Educator. This is Megan Sweet.
And I'm Susan Andrian.
And we're really excited today to have Debbie Godfrey with us, who's going to talk with us about positive parenting and all ways that we can support our kids during this incredibly challenging time. So, Debbie, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me here on the podcast. I'm Debbie Godfrey from Positive Parenting, and I have been teaching parenting classes for almost 30 years. My kids are 36, 32, and 31. And I took my first parenting class when they were 6, 2, and 1. And it changed my life. I went from yelling at them and being angry and frustrated most of the day to really getting excited about parenting and everything that I learned. And I started a parenting breakfast club with my neighbors. And after about a year of using some new tools that I had learned, I thought I would love to teach this to other parents. And I got trained and started my business, Positive Parenting, July 1st, 1994.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. And it's been a great journey. I've taught parents all over the world. And then in the pandemic, I did a shift because I used to teach in person and traveled around and started going on Zoom. And my best friend actually called me up. She's like, you have to help parents. And I'm like, I don't like teaching for free. She's like, you have to help parents. We're in a pandemic. I'm like, okay, fine. And so we did a half an hour every day on Zoom, free for parents all over the world. And it was super fun. And I loved it. And I enjoyed it. And have all of those recordings so I did manage to, I did it live, but then I sold the recordings so that people could get the recordings. So I had a way to generate some income. And through that got to be, we taught over 100 classes doing it that way. So it got to be, I got much more experience on Zoom. And so now I'm doing a lot of contracting with schools and they don't even want me in person anymore. They want me on Zoom now, which is a good thing, bad thing. I don't have to travel all over. I could do a couple of different schools in an evening. And I miss being in person with parents. So I have my first in-person gig next month in Chicago or in Illinois. And I'm very much looking forward to being with actual real parents again.
That's really great. Well, welcome, Debbie, to the show. Maybe this is a good place if I need to start. I think the pandemic has brought forward to all of us, different parts of ourselves, of our lives that maybe we didn't pay as much attention to. We weren't as aware of how impacted we were, but then kind of the concentrated experience of life and of living with our loved ones during the pandemic brought a lot of stuff forward. And your story about going on live and doing live Zoom things, I remember those early days of the pandemic and how vital it was for people to, I feel like they had some connection and how important Zoom became to so many of our lives. I'm wondering if you could tell us what are some of the common needs or challenges that have been coming up since the pandemic happened. I'd love to know if there's a difference from before, but maybe since the pandemic, what are the common issues that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think I noticed, well, first of all, of course, parents were completely flipped out, stressed because trying to work, often the parent had their computer on Zoom and the kids were behind them on Zoom with school and trying to keep them off of YouTube and also do their work in their meetings. And so many parents would take meetings out in their cars just to get, go sit out in the car just to have a quiet space. And so there was a lot of shifts. But I also heard through that, and this could be my audience, but so many people were so grateful to have the time home with their kids. There's people in this world who never would have imagined being able to be home with their kids that would have loved to, that were, and really stepped up and into it and creating more closeness, more connection with their kids and having a better relationship actually, because they were home. And so there was a lot of extremes, I think, in terms of people doing really, really well with it and people not doing well at all with it. And now it's this, how do we find our place again? And some people haven't gone back to work and some people are continuing to do a hybrid, and the schools continue to open up piece by piece. I know my grandkids' school dropped the mask mandate 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that created a whole new experience in the school environment. And so I guess I feel more like of a witness than an evaluator of what's been happening.
Hmm.
I don't know that I can make an assessment of it. I just love being witness to parents and their journeys and to being helpful to schools because like I said, I have a lot of schools that have hired me to teach. And so they're able to provide the parent education piece, which I think is so important for schools to do that. They get provided funding for parent engagement. And I think
Mhm.
parenting classes and discipline-based parenting classes are one of the best ways to engage parents and help the teachers in the classroom as well. Let's get parents more involved at home.
Yeah, I'm curious what because I'm from the mental health side of the house, as you were saying, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been working in the schools for a very long time now, and working with families to manage all the stress and manage what's happening across the board. And I appreciate what you said about not everybody had the same experience during distance learning, and for some families, it really was a gift to be able to spend a little bit more time. I was talking to a friend of mine who his kids were college age, and both of them came home and stayed with them for a year. And it was this like gift of time with his adult
That's so
children. My kids were teenagers, and so there was a lot of time in their rooms, but I did see them more than I do now. And but not everybody's experience was the same. And so the level of stress of grief and or money insecurity, food insecurity, not having childcare and being an essential worker and having to leave to go out of the house, and sort of thinking about all of these ways. I'm curious, in your teaching model, what are some of the core concepts that you teach parents, and how do you teach them that?
Well, I think one of the main things that I teach is this idea of making a real connection because
Mhm,
we're so busy with our task-oriented days. Do this, do that, go here, go there. And we're not often nurturing that relationship, which really is the basis for making all the other things
mhm,
flow. And so
mhm,
one of the core concepts I teach is genuine encounter moments that every day we need to stop what we're doing at least one time when the child says, "Hey, mom, come see, come look, let me show you this." And go see the world through their eyes. Just stop what we're doing. I mean, obviously, you don't do that when you're on a meeting or a business call or whatever. But if you're washing the dishes or doing something that you can leave to just say, "Yeah, I want to see what you have to say, hon. Show me." And
yeah,
for most, if not many, if not most kids, their jaw drops. And when a parent describes that to me, they get tears in their eyes. It's like, I didn't know my child had to try so hard to get my attention
yeah.
you know? And so I think that to me would be the first thing off the top of my head that would just be so important is to make sure that you're really sitting down and making a connection. And that it might not even be words. It might just be hanging out beside your child.
Yeah, it's often what I work when I'm working with families. I try and make it a little less overwhelming. It doesn't need so Dr. Perry, who I've been training with for a number of years, talks about
Bruce,
relational dosing.
Bruce
Uh,
Perry.
yes,
Oh, he's amazing. I
yes.
work, yeah, I took training from him like a long time ago when I was working with foster and kinship care families.
Yeah, so I'm phase 2 certified in the model with
Oh, I
Dr.
love
Perry
it.
and been training with him. And so it definitely is the lens of which I look through everything from this neurodevelopmental lens. And as you know, he talks a lot about dosing and spacing. And so these relational doses, which can be 5 seconds, 1 minute, 3 to 5 minutes, the power of those very short relational doses. And like you said, just even one a day can really make a difference. But if a parent can have 3 1-minute genuine connections with their child a day, that has such a powerful impact. And I think for many parents, it feels really overwhelming. Like, I'm just so stressed and I just don't have enough time. But when you narrow it down to that 1 minute, when you narrow it down to that just like doable thing.
Yeah, and I mean, when I teach this concept, I have an exercise that I do to show parents how it is for kids, like, okay, you be the parent, you be the child, and let's go through this whole idea and just to see how frustrating it is for them. And then when we redo it again, doing this, like just stop and take a moment to connect, all the parents observe. It only takes just like you said, 30 seconds to 3 minutes, and you leave your child feeling loved and valuable. And what's important to me is important to my parent, and all these things that our kids need to learn to have healthy self-esteem and a healthy self-concept. And I tell parents, your kids are going to bid for your attention 100 times a day. Mom, 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 dad, dad, dad. And so the minimum is 1 gem, but those other 99 times you have options. So you can totally do another gem. And I suggest, if you're not doing something super important and you can do it, it's like putting money in an emotional bank account to do it. And like you said, 2 or 3 maybe are the minimum, but you get 5, 6, 7 of the 100. And now you're really creating some good connection and good relationship there. The other option is to set a temporary limit with them. So look at the child and say, what you have to say and what you have to show me is super important to me. And I want to be paying 100% attention. And I need to finish this thing I'm writing, or this call I'm on, or whatever it is. And I'll be with you in 10 minutes. And then you be with your child in 10 minutes or less, not 10 minutes and 2 seconds. Why? I always ask parents this. Why do you have to be honorable with your time?
You'd be trustworthy.
Yeah.
They know that they can wait.
Yeah. And I even tell parents, even if they don't tell time yet, don't cheat on this. You be honorable. You be truthful. And if I think it's going to be 10 minutes, I might even tell them I need 15 or 20. And then I come in under time, because then I'm gaining even more trust, even more credibility. And what this does is, in the future, it buys you the results of that trust, which is, if you tell your child, I'll be with you in 10 minutes, they stop right there because they know you're going to keep your word. Whereas when we use vague terms like later or maybe, that's a field day for misbehavior, because later to a child is like 5 minutes from now. Later to me is tomorrow.
Right.
Maybe for a child is yes, and maybe for me is no. And so this is just going to create confusion and chaos. So we want to be really specific when we set a limit like that, and be honorable with it.
I appreciate what you're talking about with the 1 minute of connection, and that it doesn't have to be this whole thing, because the connection I'm making is, I teach about mindfulness a lot, and I watch people overcomplicate it to such a degree that it actually becomes impossible to achieve. So practicing mindfulness only works if you have 30 minutes a day and you can do it at the same time, and you have this dedicated space. And like, we create all these barriers because we have these idealized versions of what it looks like. And I often just say, look, give me 5 minutes, even if it's 1 minute at a time every day. It doesn't matter. It can be 30 seconds, just 5 minutes. We'll do it. It's no big deal. I mean, it is still a big deal, but like, that's doable. 5 minutes. And I give them examples like, at the stoplight, just don't look at your phone. Just sit and breathe and take in the surroundings. Spend an extra minute in the bathroom, like whatever. Like, there are ways to find 5 minutes. So I appreciate what you're naming around, because I think with parents, and I do it, we overcomplicate what our connections need to be, and have these idealized, I don't know, Martha Stewart-y versions of what a mom or a dad is supposed to be. And then, you don't live up to that. And then it feels like you're a failure right away. So I love this idea of the simple minute to minute guidance. I know you could, go ahead.
I was going to say, with that point in mind, thinking about the importance of, caregiver affect management, like the internal state of the parent, right? So there's what are some of is that part of the teaching, is really helping parents manage what's happening for them internally? And what are some of the ways that you support the parents in your class?
Yeah, and absolutely. That, to me, that's the number one thing of parents being able to be the parent that they want to be, is them taking care of themselves. So yes, the first session, that's what I end the first night with, is taking care of yourself as a parent, because if you're not okay, nobody else is going to be okay. And this is true for parents' mental health, spiritual health, physical health, emotional health, every part, every aspect of you. If you're fulfilled, you have things to give your children. If your cup is empty in any of those areas, you're actually taking from your children. And so I love giving parents, permission. Like, they don't need permission from me, but really go do stuff that fills your tanks, that recharges your batteries. When my kids were young, occasionally I would get a babysitter and go see a movie in the middle of the day, because that just felt so extravagant to me.
Mhm.
And it would just recharge my batteries. I also had a self rule of getting a massage every other week, because if I come home from a massage, my kids could be fighting and I can handle it like Mother Teresa. I have no problem dealing with it. But if I'm stressed and I'm frustrated, I can't handle all the complications that come with raising 3 kids, And so for me, that, yes, the taking care of yourself is huge. And the homework on that one from my class is every week do something. And this does feel overwhelming, Megan. 20 to 30 minutes, 4 times a week, do something to take care of yourself. But we give them a list of like 100 ways they can take care of themselves, and they can choose off the list or pick their own. Really, each one of you as a parent needs to find your own way. Like, what do I need to do to recharge my batteries in order to be able to do this job effectively? And be super generous with yourself. My daughter's been going through a really severe health issue, trigeminal neuralgia, whatever. And I've been helping a lot with the kids. And she's really been beating herself up because she has absolutely zero frustration tolerance for the kids right now. And it's because of her illness. And I can see it. And it's super sad. So I'm picking up a lot of the slack. But when I don't, and when she can't, and if she, yells at the kids or something like that, she's just been super hard on herself. So I've been working with her, like, you've got a thing going on, be gentle with yourself. I'm picking up the slack. Your husband's picking up the slack. We've got a good, scene going on here. It's like, you can take care of yourself and not have to let this affect you so negatively. Also, put it by piling more blame on yourself for where you're having some gaps right now. Right. And so I think for all parents, knowing your limitations, knowing what triggers you, and doing as much as you can, but at the same time, not beating up yourself when you're not okay.
And maybe seeking out support.
Seeking out help, for sure. I'm a big fan of counseling. And knowing that also kids are super resilient. And if you make a mistake, please apologize. I mean, so often we think we have to maintain some kind of fake authority by not admitting we were wrong. But that's the opposite of what's helpful for kids. They're much more receptive and understanding if we say, wow, mommy yelled at you. And that's what my daughter's been doing. I really apologize. I was not feeling well at all. And I shouldn't have yelled at you. You'll get so much bang for your buck. I remember my daughter, Michelle, came home from 3rd grade, or maybe it was 4th grade. And she came home one day and she's like, Mom, the teacher apologized to us today. And she was blown away. And I'm like, what did she apologize for? And she's like, she yelled in the class and then she apologized for yelling. And it just made this huge impression on her, way more than anything ever would. And so it's that humanity we can give our children when we are stressed.
I love the example of the humanity, because I think that's such a big part of it, is just showing that we're human and being transparent. It's something that I do with my kid all the time, usually because I've made a mistake and then I'm trying to own it. But just trying to help him, just normalizing that as adults make mistakes too, and we're not infallible, and we're not perfect, and that we're learning, and that sometimes things are really hard for us. And I think often parents don't want to do that because they feel this over kind of burden of having to be perfect, or like that they can't have, they want to keep kids safe. And I do think there's a line there, right? Like there's the oversharing line is an important one to pay attention to. And, at least for me, and I'd be curious what your thoughts are, I always just try and hold it, from the line of like just helping him understand what's going on for me, but still helping him to feel safe and supported. And like I've got him still. So I don't share like my financial worries, for example, too often with him or anything like that, because I don't want him to feel instability. So I'm wondering like what your thoughts are on like the level of that transparency and how we provide it to kids.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. You have to consider the age and stage of your child and their abilities. And it is absolutely inappropriate to make your child your therapist, for sure. So, I look at it as when it's relevant in their life, then it might be something that it's time to share. So, at the time that they're teenagers and they're starting to deal with money and having a job, that would be the time that you could communicate things about finances that maybe you would not have communicated when they were younger. There's things about my social life. I was a little more crazy than my kids were, that I would not share when they were younger. But as they got older and started, going out and doing things, I would share. And let me tell you, I shocked them. I was way worse than any of them ever were. And so it was always fun to share those stories. But age appropriate, I'm not going to jump in and start sharing those things when they're in 8th grade or whatever. It was when they were older, and it was kind of a match for where they were. And that empathy and that understanding was able to, I was able to create a connection so that I could provide that safety that you were talking about, to make sure, like, if you're ever in a place where you need a ride home, that's priority number one, is your safety over anything else. And, talking about sex and things and providing condoms and other stuff. And it's like, just making sure that you're safe is my number one priority. And that was, for me, that was what was important. Other families may have a different value, but for me, it's like, I want you to be safe, and I don't want you to have to think that I'm going to punish you in some way that would deter you from reaching out when you need me.
Yeah, I think this is really important balance of, and even around the financial stuff, I think, I would share with my kids that there were some things we couldn't afford, but our house was paid for, our food was paid for, but we were driving the old Toyota where the radio doesn't work, and we don't have enough money to get a brand new car or to sign up to go to the ski trip. Like, there's these things in which you're sharing to help them understand contextually. But I think, as Megan said, the importance of feeling held and feeling safe in these age appropriate ways. And, and now my kids are 16 and 18, and as Megan knows quite well, my daughter will point out all the mistakes I've ever made at any point, quite articulately, I may add. And I want to acknowledge those. And then when she's like kind of over exaggerating, be able to say, you're not quite.
Hold back, my friend.
Yeah. Hold up, my friend. Yeah.
Yeah, I love your daughter. This is probably a good moment to pause and take a quick commercial break. But when we come back, it would be helpful to hear from you, Debbie. I love this idea of safety, and I'm going to bring the pandemic forward again. What your thoughts are? How can parents support kids in this new world and help them feel safe when I think so much of our personal safety feels more tenuous? So when we come back, maybe we can talk a little bit more about safety and pandemic-y kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think the balance of what you started to allude to too is that we're sort of in a new phase of the pandemic, and now we're getting to reorganize again. And what are we bringing forward in terms of the gifts and the grief from that time? So we will. Let's take a
be right back.
Break. And welcome back to The Awakening Educator. I'm Susan Andrian.
I'm Megan Sweet. I'm the co-host.
Yeah. Oh, you corrected it. Yay. And we are here with Debbie Godfrey of positiveparenting.org.
.com.
I'm sorry.
.com.
.com. Sorry. .com.
Yeah.
And before we went on break, we were just exploring the issue of safety in terms of thinking about positive parenting and supporting parents and their journey at this particular time in history, where we've just sort of we're emerging now. We're in a new phase of the pandemic, and still there's these needs to reorganize and rethink, and wondering how you're incorporating that in your teaching and in your working with parents.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm not having to do too many things differently, but I am keeping my awareness out there. And what I do know is that way more parents than ever have needed counseling referrals for for themselves and for their children, especially the teenagers. I think the teenagers have been affected far more than all the other ages. It's been so difficult for them. And anybody that's looking at a future career, I think you should go into counseling. I mean, one of the school districts that I'm working with, he's hired, like, I don't know how many, 20 new school counselors, social workers, parent coordinators. Like, that's been the focus of what we need to support parents and children, is people that know how to help parents with the stress, the anxiety. Anxiety is off the charts with everybody. And I teach parenting classes, so I'm not a counselor, and I have tools to help parents with understanding how to respond to their kids' emotions and teach them, a form of emotional intelligence. But soon as you get to this place of really needing some help for your child, you need resources, and the resources are overtaxed so badly right now. The counselors are just beyond, and to get a counseling appointment, a parent who has the means, the ability, and the willingness just to get their child an appointment could take months. Yeah. So, I mean, we're at a real crisis. I can say that. And I don't know the solutions. I don't know any of that. I just keep showing up and doing my piece, which is helping the parents navigate, encourage them to keep seeking. I mean, one thing I know about parents is that if you sense something is wrong, you trust your intuition and you keep seeking. I get a very small percentage of parents most parents that go through my classes are just like, this is great. And now I have generational data, because I have children of the parents who took my classes that have now come and take my classes because now they're parents, and just how much more amazing my own children are parenting, having been parented this way. So I can see how wonderful it is. And just, always reaching out when a parent thinks there's something still isn't right. I'm doing everything from your class. I feel like I've done this and that, and something still isn't right. And I just encourage them, because over the years, there's always something there. There's a diagnosis there. There's some kind of a learning disability, or a on the spectrum thing, or a emotional social thing. There's something there. If a parent is intuiting it, you need to trust your judgment there.
Yeah.
You're the best judge of your own child.
And that's really hard for a lot of parents to be able to acknowledge that their child is struggling. I'm finding both the over and under diagnosing of like what's going on, the parents who like don't want to acknowledge and are trying everything, and then the parents who are that this is a typical child and this is typical behavior, and they want to, because it's so hard. And I think I'm curious about the ways in which, how long is your parenting class? Like, how many weeks is it, or how many sessions, and what kind of transformation do you see over that time? Just in terms of normal, helping parents understand what's typical developmental, and how you can support a parent of a typical child, and then how to help them recognize these things that maybe need more additional support.
Yeah, that's about 15 hours of curriculum. So when I did these in person, it was 3 hours a week for 5 weeks. On Zoom, 3 hours is way too long for a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So like I said, during the pandemic, we were doing 30-minute classes. So I did that entire curriculum right in the middle of when I was doing those classes, and it took us a month. So 5 days a week, that's whatever it was, it added up to the 15 hours that I needed to convey all the concepts. And I mean, this started even from the very first class I ever taught. Say half of the people in the class come because they think back then ADD and ADHD was the big thing, and then it became ODD, and now it's sensory processing disorder. There's always the thing, that most of the kids are getting diagnosed with. And it's not that it's not real. It is real. It's just that I think we're nuancing so much of what is children are experiencing. And I think our environment is causing a lot of weird stuff with our children. I mean,
absolutely,
the numbers,
100%.
That the spectrum is going to be up to like 50% of kids are going to be on the spectrum by 2050, I think it is, or something crazy like that. So they're,
what is that?
It's a huge number. It's a huge number.
I've heard that it's growing. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think we're definitely, like, our physical environment, our emotional environment, our global environment, political environment, the stressors are so many. And not to get too political, but I remember thinking, at the start of the last president's presidency, about President Trump's presidency, I was like, okay, things are going to be hard. And what I feel like has happened is it's gotten we're living out movie type scenarios, right? Where we're just watching so much of what we felt like created stability and safety for ourselves physically, how our government, immigration, I mean, you name the different topics, we have been breaking down so many of those things that for some of us, not some people never felt safe or comfortable. I want to really acknowledge that. But for some of us who felt like we could rely on some of those systems, they have felt like they've gone away a bit. And then comes the pandemic and the social isolation. And Susan and I both have teenagers at home, and it's really impacted their ability. And I think our kids are actually relatively resilient and like are doing well, but it's changed how they see themselves and orient to the world. And right now I'm a high school principal, and yeah, the emotions that the kids have are so high. And it surprises me because I'm like, I taught high school a million years ago, and my main thought a million years ago was that these kids don't need me. So I started teaching middle school because I was like, they're like already kind of like
They're baked.
launched.
Yeah,
But
they're
that's not
baked.
true for the group that I'm with right now, where they're needing so much support and so much care, and small things can become really huge really quickly. And it impacts the teachers, and the teachers are fried and frazzled, and so they're not as able to meet kids in this moment, and then parents are challenged. So it's just such a hard time because I feel like we're kind of pinging off of each other sometimes. Yeah.
Megan, you've heard me talk about this before, but I think that the access to technology, and so even thinking about Dr. Perry's work about building a resilient nervous system and the activation of the stress response system in these healthy doses, right? And kids, this generation right now has had technology available to them since they came out of the womb. And so when we see that kids who are getting activated get handed a device in order to calm their nervous system, they're actually not building up the resiliency to be able to manage small stressors. And they're not developing that the resilient nervous system and the brain organization to be able to manage the stressors of life. And I'm curious, like how you incorporate technology, because there's been such an impact that the change since you started doing this work. Now, to me, it's the most challenging and important parenting intervention of how are you managing your child's access to technology, when do you use it, how often do you use it, what kind of controls do you put on it. And I've taught a few parenting workshops around technology, and as a parent I've struggled and tried to figure out what is the best way and managing it. And so as Megan was talking, I think that has a big impact, in addition to then the pandemic, which had us all on screens all the time.
Yeah. And that was really, I mean, that did it there, because I like Waldorf parents are my crowd. I teach in a lot of Waldorf schools, and those on principle, or in theory, they don't have technology. Like they sign agreements, and the kids that go to Waldorf schools, they don't have technology. And the families that I've known, most of them comply with that. And even my daughter, they weren't allowing, we don't have TV. There's no screen time other than maybe watching movies or something like that. And so the pandemic rolled in. Now everybody has to be on Zoom. Like your school is on Zoom. So you are going to be on technology. And so all of those parents that had held such a high standard for keeping their kids off screens can't do it. All bets are off. And it's true. The last I would say for 7 years now, screen time is up in the top 3 of the reasons parents come and see me, is how do I handle screen time? What do I do with this screen time? And again, the same communication skills and tools that I've always taught are what I use around that. And the extra factor of the addictiveness of screens. There's a doctor I follow, Leonard Sachs. I don't know if you've heard of him. I really like his information about screen time with kids. And he's like a no longer than 30. I think it's 30 minutes, not even a day. It might be like on the weekends or something. He's really restrictive with it. But he has all the research to show
Yeah.
why and how damaging it is to our kids. And so figuring out, each family has to figure out what they're going to do. I was just coaching a mom today, a 12-year-old, and they're starting to, she's been really pressing for the phone. And I informally poll parents everywhere I go. Like, my daughter will have a group of friends over. It's like, okay, what age do you guys think you're going to give your kids cell phones? Because I didn't have to deal with that. My kids were teenagers when cell phones came on board. So it wasn't something that I had to deal with. And it seems like consensus age is around 12 is what my, just my observation has been finding. And of course, many kids have them younger and some kids don't have them till older, but that's kind of what they're shooting for. And I asked this mom and she said 13, which she's going to be in the fall. And all of a sudden she realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to deal with this.
Mhm.
What am I going to do? So we were able to talk about, like, how are you going to set this up? What are the standards? What are the tools you're going to use to manage this? Because it does change your child's behavior. They will become different kids when they have too much screen time.
Yeah, no, that's really true. And it would be great for you to say the name of the report again. I think that you were talking about the research you were just referencing around amount of screen time.
His name is Dr. Sachs, S-A-X.
S-A-X, Dr.
Yeah.
Sachs. Great. Yeah, I agree. I mean, my son, the prototypical fight, I feel like he's probably actually having it with his dad at this very moment, is that he has a cell phone. The intention of the cell phone is for him to communicate primarily with his father and I, and yet that is the least often used feature of that phone. And so we'll be calling him, reaching out to him. I look at his phone, he has hundreds of texts, and it's because he just never reads them. So it can be really challenging how we get our kids together. I think for me, I've been trying to find ways to get my kid off screen and the places to do that. And I've personally developed a habit in the pandemic that we continue to do, which is we go on walks together. And if we go on a walk together, he doesn't have his screen out. And generally that's when the conversations flow. So I certainly don't ever try and force a conversation with him. But often walks are the place where it happens. And it's just such so then you listen carefully when those moments get to come up, for sure.
Right. And there's a safety when you're walking because you're doing this parallel. You're not facing each other directly. So they're parallel and you're walking. So there's this pattern, repetitive, rhythmic way that opens up and allows for the connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's to me, nature is the antidote to screen time. Nature, getting out in nature, the antidote to screen time.
You're speaking Susan's language for sure.
Yes.
We're actually already at our next commercial break. And so I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'd love for us to talk about nature connections and children, because we won't be able to avoid it. And we shouldn't. And then also just, again, an opportunity for you to let people know how to connect with you, because we're already at that time in the show. So we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back, everyone. We're back already. We're so fast when we go on our commercial breaks, like lightning. When we went away, we were saying we're going to come back. We're meeting with Debbie of Positive Parenting, and we were going to learn a little bit more about ways that we can connect with our kids in this time of screens, in this time of high anxiety. I was saying that I walk with my child, and that's a way for us just to connect. And you were saying nature, Debbie, is a good place. Could you tell us a little bit more about why nature is a good connector?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously it's so comforting, and everybody feels different. Like when we're out in the trees, the forest, or at the beach, or whatever our favorite environment is. I was very fortunate. We lived about 4 miles from Jefferson Memorial Forest, which is a forest. And during the pandemic, I could take the kids there. We would go to the creek, go to the streams, take little hikes. We would be not around other people. And, it was the safe way to be able to get the kids out and get their energy out. But the other thing about it, especially for really young kids, is the visual. So screens are right here. And this is why their brains are developing differently, because they're spending all this time on this thing right in front of their face. And that's not good for their eyesight development, which is related to their neuron development of their brain when they're very young. And so getting them out in nature, pointing things out to them, I'm looking outside at the trees, like looking at the trees, noticing the birds, noticing the wind moving the trees. All of these things are absolutely crucial to our kid becoming healthy. Like that's what we need for them. And so if their brain can develop on nature more so than on screens, they're going to be a much healthier human.
100% agree. I'm actually just training in, I just finished my training in forest bathing and forest therapy, working on forest therapy certification. And there's a lot of science to back up what you were just saying, and that there's that experiencing the different light qualities, the metropenes that come off of the trees that really cause, they're good for your high blood pressure. They help your metabolism. They help you, reduce anxiety. They calm your nervous system. And then activate mirror neurons by watching life move. There's all kinds of relational and physical benefits from being in nature. And when you're able to do that with it sounds like what you're saying is that you're actually prescribed that to the parents that you're working with. It's just like, if you and your child are having all these arguments, one way to interrupt that is to get outside and follow a creek. And all of a sudden, sort of the stress will go down. I know that during the pandemic, my daughter and I would go for hikes, but it was a really hard time for her. So even in nature, we still struggled sometimes. But I think she also found that as that safe place to kind of process through all that she was holding, as the most social 15-year-old that you could be, stuck in a room by herself with limited technology, limited phone access, while her friends were probably on the phone until 2 a.m. And so there was this really hard time. But part of what I hear you saying is that if you go out into nature, that it allows you to experience that will change your brain, that ultimately make you more able to thrive.
Right. And I think even if you weren't completely satisfied with the state of what your relationship did on those hikes, that her physiology was benefited by it. And so, you did a good job. It was great.
Yeah, it was good. We kept going anyway because I knew she needed it, but it was also,
and that's
her
part
therapy.
Of being a parent. You do what you know is best for your child, despite what they think about it. Like, you do what's right and what's best for them, and and you persevere through their complaints and whatever it is that they have. And I love also what you said, Megan, too, because I found the same thing with my son, that the only way to really have a conversation with him was for me to be quiet and us to be out in nature. And if I could just hold my tongue and quit yakking so much, because I could be a chatterbox, if I just didn't talk, eventually he would start opening up. And he's still like that at 31 years old. I still have to keep my mouth shut and just hang out and wait till he's ready. And then he'll divulge everything, But if I try to push or persist or, somehow manipulate the situation, it just doesn't work. He's going to do it in his own time and when he feels safe and comfortable.
I think it does go back to what you said at the very beginning, which is, when we do start to pay attention, when we do show those moments, we're putting, marbles in the jar, pennies in the bank, whatever we want to say, around building that trust with our kids, so that they know that we are interested and we do care. So that when those moments come up, they do open up. Because I think, you have to have both. You have to have those small little moments where you are true to your word. You show that you care, you give them that attention, and then you wait patiently and hope that that the information will flow. And thankfully for all three of us, we get that, sometimes more information than we want, I'm sure, for all of us. But it's such a gift to be able to engage with our kids that way. Debbie, this has been such a pleasure to talk with you on the show today. I wanted to make sure people knew how to get a hold of you. So how can they learn about taking classes with you?
Yeah, so my website is positiveparenting.com, and
Mhm.
they can go there. I also have a daily podcast, the Positive Parenting Pep Talks podcast.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's just a 3 to 5 minute pep talk every day. So it's not a
Nice.
interview or anything like that. I just do pick a topic and talk for 3 to 5 minutes. So it's just a quick way to start your day on a positive parenting note. And of course, it's on all the platforms. And yeah, that's the way to find me, is through my website.
I so appreciate your focus on positivity too. It's something that Susan and I have talked a lot about. Like, there are a lot of problems and challenges in the world, and it can feel really overwhelming. But I think it's also what we choose to focus our attention on. While that can be hard, it definitely doesn't hurt. So thank you so much, Debbie, for being a part of the show and having such a wealth of knowledge and insights to share with us.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Wonderful.
I love the
Thank
work you two are doing in the world too. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. We're all adding to the score. Well, thank you so much.